Moving story this morning, and the US President Donald Trump has confirmed that the United States has captured the Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and flown him out of the country after a series of airstrikes inside the country. Sources inside the opposition have told Sky News they believe the capture was what they're calling a negotiated exit. In a Truth Social post, Donald Trump wrote this: the United States of America has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolás Maduro, who has been, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. This operation was done in conjunction with US law enforcement. Well, sirens could be heard across the city with plumes of smoke rising into the night sky. The Venezuelan government has declared a state of emergency. Strikes were heard in the capital, Caracas, as well as the states of Miranda, Aragua, and La Guaira. Details of the events overnight in the capital are scarce at the moment, but some videos on social media are circulating showing explosions seen here taking place in the port area, that is, of La Guaira. A witness described the moment of the explosions.
I
live here in Chacao, Pen, and now I went out to look around, and now all you see is smoke.
And pictures here appear to show Chinook helicopters. Now, these are often used by the US military to carry special forces, the suggestion being that it was Delta Force, one of the special forces units that was involved here. The only country anywhere in the region that uses Chinooks, by the way, is the US, meaning that those aircraft are the ones that's seen here over Caracas. Right, let's bring in our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clarke. Good morning, Michael. And well, we've talked about this many times about what we thought was going to happen, what you thought was going to happen, given the build-up of military forces around Venezuela. I don't think we ever quite discussed this.
No, we thought that there'd be strikes because Donald Trump said about 6 weeks ago that they were considering a ground operations, i.e. strikes on the ground. And the thought then was that he might have been going for what they would regard as narco centres or centres of the narcotics business, even though they'd be quite hard to trace and well enough to bomb it. And the sense always was that they would try to edge Maduro out. And Richard Grenell, who was the envoy established throughout 2025, Richard Grenell's Trump's envoy in Venezuela, was charged with negotiating Maduro's removal. And a couple of months ago, it sounded as if that was plausible, but then it went off the table. The Americans weren't interested in what Maduro said he wanted as price for stepping down. So I think that this, as a precipitate action to get rid of Maduro, apparently, as far as we can tell, in some sort of voluntary arrangement, that has been a surprise. And it looks so far as if it's been extremely successful. So we don't have any reports as yet, although it's early days, of course, of casualties or of extensive fighting. It looks as if there's been a fair amount of destruction, but I would guess that a lot of those attacks, those air attacks by either aircraft and or missiles from the missile-carrying cruisers that the Americans have got just off the coast, were probably conducted on air defense centers. I mean, the Venezuelans do have S-300 Russian air defenses, quite a lot of them, so they may well have taken those out as a way of neutralizing them to make sure that no accidents happen to their troops going in. And it looks as if they've conducted some sort of special force operations and lifted Maduro and Sila Flores, his wife, literally only those two, apparently with some sort of agreement, and they've taken them out and they've taken them somewhere, presumably toward the United States. We don't know. But that looked pretty successful. I imagine Donald Trump will be probably cock-a-hoop when he conducts his press conference, because it looks as if this has been a textbook and well-planned operation.
Just should tell you, Michael, that we're getting word that tanks have now been seen close to the presidential palace, and also that the Venezuelan defense minister has issued what he's calling a full deployment of the armed forces after these US strikes. I guess on the face of it, this is unsurprising, given that the military tend to move after these things. But what do you make of that?
Yeah, Vladimir Lopez is the man we're talking about, I think, who's the Minister of Defense and the Chief of the Military. Also, his deputy is Domingo Lares, and he will be pretty important too in the next few hours. So I think, I'm just looking at that picture on the screen as you put it. I mean, that's not a US vehicle. I'm pretty sure that's a Venezuelan armoured personnel carrier or armoured fighting vehicle. And if Lopez has ordered them onto the street around the presidential palace, I mean, that's entirely logical, because he'd be frightened of as a civil disorder as dawn arrives in Venezuela. They'll be worried that people converge on the presidential palace and sort of try to ransack the place. So I imagine that's a sort of policing response. But we don't really know how the Venezuelan army will react. And I think, as our previous guest was saying, Professor de Alba from IISS, the reaction of the army is absolutely critical in these cases. I mean, if the army decides to sit on its hands and allow whatever's going to happen, then that gives you one set of outcomes. And if the army is proactive, gets out on the streets and tries to maintain the regime without Maduro, i.e. it's the Maduro regime but without the chief, then I think the public reaction might be really quite different, and I think there may well be the violence. So we don't really know whether the Maduro regime is really over, or whether the opposition can do anything about it. I mean, these opposition groupings. I mean, one of them, the Democratic Unity Round Table, as it's called, its acronym is MUD, M-U-D, which I'm afraid is rather appropriate, because it is all over the place. It's simply united by their hatred of Maduro, and there's an awful lot that divides them, other than the unity around hating him. There's a better called a unitary platform, which is a version of the MUD grouping, and that's a bit more coherent. But it isn't clear, for all that people respect Maria Machado, who won the Nobel Prize, and the person who ran when she wasn't allowed to run, her deputy in a sense, Edmundo Urrutia. People respect them and like them, but that's not the same as saying that there is an opposition really ready to go. Maria Machado says there is. She says that the opposition are ready to take over as and when. Well, if so, then this is their opportunity. But how that is implemented in the next few hours will be critical, and it comes back full circle to what the army does. So Vladimir Lopez, the Minister of Defense, and possibly Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, if he is still vice president. In theory, he still is. We'll see if he is by the end of the day. But Lopez and Rodriguez are probably the two most important people in Venezuela for the next 24 hours.
To the president, Donald Trump, capturing President Nicolás Maduro and his wife. Joining me now is Mariano de Alba, Associate Fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. And good morning to you, and thank you very much for being with us. And first of all, what do you make of these events?
Well, I think it's too early to tell, right? It's obvious that Maduro's exit from power is a major development. But as of right now, I think that, the Venezuelan military will have to decide what comes next, in the sense that either they support the Chavismo staying in power, most probably Delcy Rodriguez, who is now the vice president, but there are also other figures within Chavismo that could rise to the challenge, or the Venezuelan armed forces decide to perhaps negotiate with the United States and allow for the Venezuelan opposition to come back into the country. Both the president that was elected in July last year is out of the country, is currently in Spain, and also the main leader of the Venezuelan opposition, Maria Corina Machado, who recently won the Nobel Prize. They are both out of the country. So to say it shortly, in the next few hours, it's the Venezuelan military who is calling the shots, and who will have to decide whether to continue with Chavismo, because they know that it is unlikely that the U.S. government will put boots on the ground in Venezuela, and run the risk of another set of operations that like the ones we have seen in the past few hours. Or perhaps the Venezuelan military will decide to open the door for a transition, for a democratic transition in Venezuela, allowing the person who was duly elected last year to assume power.
Yeah, some sort of a democratic process. Just before we talk more about that, I wonder what you think of this whole idea of this negotiated exit that is coming from the opposition, that this is a deal that was done, because the military operation that took place suggests that may not be the case.
Yeah, I think I agree. Especially the fact that there were bombings in different sites. This was not only an operation that was that went into the country to extract Mr. Maduro from Venezuela. We still don't know what happened within the compound that Maduro and his wife were presumably sleeping, if there are Venezuelans from the armed forces that were shot dead, if basically it was an operation without casualties. We know the U.S. government has already said that apparently there were no U.S. casualties, but they decided to issue no comment as to possible Venezuelan casualties in this whole operation. So that's an unknown for now. I do not think that really this was part of a negotiation. It seems that the U.S. government decided to do what has been threatening to do for a long time, which is to remove Maduro out of power. But now the question is, what happens next, in the sense that, I do think that the Delcy Rodriguez and other figures on Chavismo, and presumably the Venezuelan armed forces, will try to hold on to power.
So let's just talk a little bit more about that. I mean, I suppose the key thing is what the military, the senior generals, decide to do.
Yes, I agree. They have to decide basically in two options. Obviously, if this was a negotiated agreement, the negotiation only covered Mr. Maduro and his wife, who presumably they are now under U.S. custody. Mr. Maduro has an indictment from U.S. federal courts for drug trafficking. So we will have to see if he faces trial in the U.S., but there are also other figures from the Venezuelan military, the Minister of Defense, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, and also the other person who was very close to Hugo Chavez, Diosdado Cabello. He's also facing an indictment in the U.S. So it remains to be seen, but my